Well, greetings, everyone. Kevin Clark here. I'm glad to welcome you to the People-Centered Internet call here in late August. It's a honor to have Ben Shneiderman joining us again. Ben is a distinguished university professor in the University of Maryland Department of Computer Science, and that's part of the College of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences at their main campus in College Park. And he was the founding director of the University of Maryland Human-Computer Interaction Lab. Ben is going to share, he's been with us before, and he's thankfully come back now that he's published a book on human-centered artificial intelligence, ensuring human control while increasing automation, as you see right here on your screen. So Ben, we're delighted to have you with us. Please share more about your background as you, share your main thesis with us. We're delighted to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here again. But last time I spoke to you, I was working on the book, and now there is a book. So the story is a little more well-formed, but some of you may find these comments familiar to you. I've certainly strengthened my vigorous belief in where we're going, that there's an alternate view of the future that is human-centered, and that the views that we hear so often about computers taking over and social robots and the inevitability of high tech and autonomous this and that and the other. I think there's another way to see the future, and I hope to offer a vision that inspires you, because it's going to take at least a village, maybe more than a village, to change the dominant notions about what the future of technology is all about. So that's what I'm here today. It's a tough challenge. I'll speak for about 35 minutes, and then we can have some discussions and fill out the hour in whatever way you want to, and hopefully challenging ways. So I am professor at University of Maryland. I'm proud of the University of Maryland's Human-Computer Interaction Lab, and always happy to wave the flag of that group, now on its 10th director, Jessica Vitak. So that's kind of the satisfaction that the group goes on in its great ways, but with different hands and different ways of thinking. It's mainly an interdisciplinary bunch between computer science and the College of Information Studies, but many other units around campus, including the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities, MITH. And so our website has 1,000 technical reports and 300 project pages and so on. So there's lots to pick up and lots of videos. Hope some of you know me from my book, Designing the User Interface. It's my calling card for many years, now in 6th edition, requiring 5 co-authors to tell the remarkable story of how this modest-sized group of researchers produced such dramatic effects in terms of design of the web, the link itself, which I take some credit for, the touchscreen devices, the mobile high-precision mobile devices, which were my work, and many other things. Photo tagging was my effort, but I'm most well known for the visualization work, a little somewhat more technical, the development of tree maps, a successful commercial product called Spotfire, network visualizations, and patient history, electronic history visualization. So that's kind of the broad show. Today, we focus narrowly on this idea of what is human-centered AI, and I see it as a set of processes for arriving at the design of systems that are shaped by a set of guidelines and principles that assert the primality of human control. And the goal is to amplify, augment, empower, and enhance people. That's what we're at, and that fits with people-centered internet. And there's lots of opportunities and ways to do this right. And if we keep our focus of attention on supporting people, amplifying, augmenting, empowering, and enhancing people, there's a better chance we'll get this right. No guarantees, but this vision has proven to be successful commercially and has brought the kind of systems that I want to use and which make me feel more human, more creative, more self-efficacious, and more socially connected. That's where we're going. So there's three parts to this. The first is the reframing of our thinking about technology, this new framework of HCAI. The second is the shift in the design metaphors and the language we use to describe the technology. And then as we build systems, there's a lot of things to think about. The 15 principles of governance structures. Can't go into all of them, but we'll briefly touch on them and dive into one or two of them. So here we go. HCAI framework is the first part of this, and this takes me back to the first edition of the book, in which there was a chapter called Balancing Automation and Human Control. And I was under the influence of Tom Sheridan, famous MIT professor, who had developed a 10-level scale between human control at 0 and computer automation at 10. And the assumption was you were trying to get increased computer automation, which necessarily meant you had less human control. And that idea of a zero-sum game was common, and I believed it, and that seemed to be logical. But over the years, I came to question that. And by later editions of the book, that chapter became ensuring human control while increasing automation. And even for me, that was a bit of a puzzle when I first wrote that down. It seemed like the right way, but I had trouble explaining what that meant. And over time, I've come to be clearer that it separates out human control from low to high and computer automation. And so there are really two scales. Now, they're not completely independent, and so I prefer to show it as a two-dimensional grid here of low to high computer automation on the bottom and low to high human control on the left side. And so the most common area that people talk about are computer control. And on the lower right, we see things that seem like highly autonomous, like pacemakers and airbags. Airbags need to be deployed automatically within 200 milliseconds. Of course, you need autonomous machine control, but not everything happens in 200 milliseconds. And a lot of things take longer time. And sometimes we, can find ways to blend these. And so the other extreme is human control entirely. When I ride my bicycle, play piano, play with children, then, I'm happy to be just fully human, autonomous, do what I want, not guided by a machine, not limited, not as facilitated, but I do it. I'm human and I relate to other people in a social way. The place where we're going is this combination where we get high human control and high computer automation. And the way to think about this is to break out any design problem into a series of a dozen or so smaller subtasks. And some tasks can be done autonomously by computer with quite high reliability, safety, and trustworthiness. And so we should do that. And other things we want to be fully human controlled. So elevator is sort of an older example. There's a high degree of AI and machine learning and scheduling elevators in buildings. That goes on behind the scenes. By the way, for the internet, there's a high degree of AI machine learning to route packages and packets and to organize things on the internet. However, the parts we care about of sending text messages to our friends or email among groups, those are things we want to be in control. So the elevator, you walk up, you press the button, the light goes on, and it shows you the elevator arriving, the door is open, you step inside, you press 6, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the door is open, and you get what you want. You have the feeling and the experience of being in charge, you've gotten what you wanted, you feel safe, it's reliable and trustworthy, but there's a lot of AI going on. Maybe a stronger example is the digital camera, where there's a great deal of machine learning and AI to set the shutter and the focus and color balance, reduce hand jitter even, lots of things going on, but that's your photo. You compose it, you zoom where you want to, and you click for your decisive moment, as Henri Cartier-Bresson called it. That's your photo. And then you can edit, you can share it, and it's yours. It's your creative action. You had the support of technology to make it happen, but you've been able to control the creative aspects that are meaningful to you. So that's the combination we want here. There are a couple of dangers on the side here of excessive automation, exemplified by the Boeing 737 MAX, where the designers believed they could have a fully autonomous system, so autonomous that the pilots were not even informed of its existence, nor of its initiation. And therefore, there was no display that gave them situation awareness and status, nor an easy option for turning it off. And so that's the kind of tragedy of excessive automation. And we see excessive human, there was other examples of excessive automation. The lights out factory dream of automobile manufacturing gave way to a more balanced notion where you can have high degrees of automation, but still have humans around supervising, dealing with problems, and most importantly, being creative in improving the system. That was the goal of integration of human participation. There is a danger of excessive human control. It's an old idea in human factors engineering, and so devices like your self-cleaning oven, if the temperature goes above 600 degrees Fahrenheit, the door is locked. You can't open it because it would be very dangerous to open that oven door. And so that's the dangers of excessive human control. So we want to be aware about that. So that's kind of the basic idea. Let's take one example of pain control designs. World War II morphine drip bag of a plastic bag with drip, drip, drip was a great step forward because it gave morphine, which relieved pain. But there were two dangers. Too much morphine could be deadly, and too little morphine did not relieve the pain. One solution, one improvement was the automatic dispenser that measured your heart rate and your breathing rate, and therefore prevented delivering excessive morphine. But sensing human pain is not something we've done, not that we can do, and therefore you have a patient-guided dispenser kind of trigger patients were given that they could click, and so they could get another dose of morphine, but it had its limitations. You could only get a certain extra doses of morphine per time period, and so it prevented the idea of excessive human control. The movement for these devices is to have patient-guided, clinician-monitored systems where a central control room, they monitor 30 or 50 of these devices, and a hospital can see the performance of them, collect the data on their usage and on the patients, thereby improve the algorithms for delivery of morphine and tailor them more effectively to elderly patients, to young patients, to patients with various kind of problems of breathing or circulatory issues. And so we see a mature approach here that combines computer and human control, and it does it on different time periods. So in the short time periods, you can get more automaticity. As you go to longer time periods, you want more human control. And that's where we're going with all of these designs. We'll see examples in a few minutes. And that comes from the second part of this talk about design metaphors. I start with just a few sort of philosophical comments that Margaret Bowden's point very clearly that robots are simply not people. We just have to remember that people and computers are very, very, very different. They're a different category. And that category error that some people make of suggesting that computers are becoming like people leads to problems in design. Joanna Bryson adds, humans, not robots, are responsible agents. Another aspect of the distinction is that we have a different aspect or attitude, which people are responsible, not computers. And so legally, morally, ethically, etc., we have responsibility in the human hands. And then remember, there are distinct features of computers. Of course, I should maybe say distinct features of humans, but you know, the computers, we want to take advantage of all those things. And if we try to make a computer like a person, we might forget to use some of these design possibilities. And similarly, human creativity, the passion, empathy, humility, and intuition of humans is really special, and we have to appreciate and value it. And so we want to understand these differences and remember, people are not computers, computers are not people. Okay, so this takes us to an important screen, and maybe the most controversial one. And the suggestion I make of shifting from these older notions of intelligent agents, of teammates, of assured autonomy and social robots. They're compelling notions, they're attractive to many people, but I suggest that they have their limitations and in some cases can be misleading and dangerous. And so, important part of my goal is to shift thinking, language, and metaphors. My metaphors and language are not as exciting. Maybe you can help me and suggest better words, but I've chosen the term super tools to describe what I want to build that augment human abilities, empower users, and enhance performance. And then we'll take a look at examples of those and telebots that boost human perceptual and motor skills, enabling remote operations, the control centers to manage all these devices, and then the active appliances that are for. Was that a question or comment? Or a challenge? Anyway, you're welcome to challenge this.
No, actually, it was a stray noise from somebody who just joined, Ben. We've got it on mute.
Actually, this diagram is now different from what it was in the book. This diagram has evolved the most in my thinking over the last 3 or 4 years. And this is actually the first time I'm using this. It's a step beyond what's in the book already. And so it takes a little bit further in clarifying what the distinctions are. Let's take a look at examples. The super tools I've mentioned already, the digital camera, where you get a great deal of control. You get a preview of what's going to happen. You get to take the picture when you want to, then you can edit, revise, make a lot of changes, or just discard it and take another photo and then share it with friends and family, edit it in other ways. Another familiar example, our navigation devices here. I've asked for a route from the White House downtown to College Park, 8 miles away. And so the machine learning and AI give you 3 or 4 different possibilities, and it even computes the current estimated time with the blockages and so on. You can either go through the city with the stoplights for shorter mileage, or you can go out on the Beltway and circulate outside with fewer stoplights, but a longer road. Turns out it's slightly faster to do that. And so you have your choice of which way you want to go, and then it's up to you. And even once you initiate the action, you can change it. You can change your mind. You can go off on a side street and do what you want, and it'll recalculate and get you back steered to where your destination is. Other ways of looking at these kind of AI systems are the text and search auto completion. I start typing University of Maryland, I get a variety of completion suggestions, and it's up to me if I select them or if I continue typing. Just like spelling correction, it points out a mistake and offers an alternative, and then it's up to you to choose whether you select it or not. So those are familiar ones. Maybe more ambitious one of super tool is the Bloomberg terminal. Bloomberg collects 1.6 million articles every day, which it clusters, groups, and organizes through machine learning, natural language processes, and then presents the information in the way that each user has selected, whether they're interested in a certain industry or a certain company or a certain country or region. They get the information they want because they can select what they want. Notice that it's a tiled display, not an overlapped window. It's spatially stable so that certain information is always in the same place. And so a quick glance will get what they want, and then they can carry out the actions that they want. So this is so valuable that more than 300,000 people pay more than $20,000 a year to have one of these on their desk. And so that's how powerful such devices can be. And the idea of a Bloomberg terminal is propagating to medical and transportation and other kind of systems. It's a good set of principles of design that nicely integrates AI and machine learning with good user interface design to present a tool that empowers the user. The telebot notion generally involves remote control, and not too much more remote than the Mars rovers on the surface of Mars. And the AI advocates will claim this is an autonomous device. After all, it rides around on the surface, avoids obstacles, avoids precipices, turns its solar panels to be optimal, turns its antenna to be optimally placed. Yet, there are 80 people at NASA's JPL who are operating this device. And they work on different time scales. So that's another way of separating out human and machine control. I suggested before, there might be a dozen tasks, subtasks. Some can be assigned to computers. Some can be carried out by humans. There's also the possibility of the short term, as it's moving around. Yes, it's autonomous, avoiding obstacles, but in the time frame of minutes, hours, days, and weeks, the human operators are taking control, and they're dealing with problems on the Mars rover. They're taking advantage of opportunities of something that shows up on the horizon. They can decide to change the path and decide to go there. And so there's yet another example of how we balance these technologies. And another telebot, I think is an admirable success story, is the Da Vinci and now other manufacturers, surgical systems that allow a physician, surgeon to carry out very precise operations deep inside human cavities with just a little buttonhole or keyhole incision, and these pencil-thin effectors are placed very precisely and manipulated by the physician, surgeon from their console, and it has the further advantage of reducing hand tremor and making the operations very precise. And so the manufacturer says, robots don't perform surgery. Your surgeon performs surgery with Da Vinci by using instruments that he or she guides via a console. So here again, it's human control that makes this work, okay? Yet the journalists will tell you robot surgeons are better than human surgeons. And that kind of distorted metaphor is quite dangerous. A group of us have lately been working to make a new set of guidelines. There's 8 of them in our current list of guidelines for journalists and editors for writing about AI and machine learning. Some, like Emily Tucker at Georgetown Law School, has gone so far as to eliminate the use of the words AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning in all of their writing because she thinks they're misleading. Jessica Homan suggests instead of machine learning, we call it machine guessing, which somewhat deflates the sort of grand notion of the learning. And so we're finding ways to reflect and think about the design and the presentation of these technologies to present a more realistic view. The control center idea, I've already mentioned the hospital control center that may do more than manage the emergency room scheduling and patients and bed assignments, and manage the devices and supervise what's happening, collect additional data, and improve performance overall, maybe save energy, improve staffing, etc. So that idea of human control is now integrated with, we may have AI algorithms to do the scheduling, but we'll keep human supervision. Control centers are in counterterrorism, transportation, industrial control centers, and many other places. Okay, and the last category of active appliances, Google Nest has a lot of machine learning, but you're in control. It lets you set the temperature more effectively, lets you save energy, and schedule more efficiently. It used to be very hard to schedule your heating and air conditioning. You'd have to reset it at every hour of the day, and that takes a lot of effort and likely to be something that you would avoid doing. So automate that part, and it gives you greater control over the temperature in your house at the times you want it. So it's a reframing of thinking about it. And iRobots, Roomba's another, I have one of these, and use it. It came from the idea of autonomous robots that just did the cleaning, but it's evolving into a more controlled device where your cell phone app now lets you know what's happening. It gives you a map of where it is and where it might go. It needs to do more because I want to know when it's coming into my office so I can clear out, and I need to know how long it's going to take and when it will be done. So those things are still the evolution of these devices. But every appliance in your household is getting backed up with machine learning and AI algorithms to improve the efficiency, energy efficiency, speed, performance, tailor your wash cycle to the actual clothing and the dirt that's in them and the load that's there. So increased use of sensors allows you to create some degree of automation, but at any point you can stop your washer or dryer, add another piece of clothing or take out that precious blouse or shirt and before it gets too wrinkled in the dry cycle. And so you're in control and you can do the things that you want to do. Okay, so that's the notion of active appliances. And one more example, the shift from the autonomous pacemaker embedded in your chest is now becoming one that's operated by Bluetooth from your cell phone, where you can set this to be different rates for your pacemaker. And then your physician or the manufacturer can monitor tens of thousands of these devices, collect the data on their usage, and thereby improve the algorithms for older users or younger users or people with different kinds of physical ailments. And so that's the kind of movement we're looking to, is increased human control over the things that matter and allow further creativity and novelty while automating the things for which machines can be made reliable. Okay, that's the second part. Part 3 is governance structures. There's a long talk here, but I'll be brief and we'll focus on just some of it. Here's my overview diagram of the 4 levels of governance structures. From the software engineering teams, there are 5 practices which we'll look at, to the safety culture within an organization that might have dozens of software engineering teams, to the industry, which might have dozens of organizations involved in that industry. And then the outer oval is government regulation, which can be beneficial. We'll take a look at. Okay, so the team side of it has 5 components. And I'll just briefly mention the idea of audit trails, like the flight data recorders of civil aviation have made civil aviation flying safe. And the same idea is what's needed for better audit trails for self-driving cars, or I prefer to call them safe driving cars, so that when something goes wrong, we know what's happened. And that's important. As you may know, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration is conducting an investigation of 16 crashes of Tesla cars on autopilot, which crashed into stationary police, fire, and ambulance vehicles, either on the road or on the side of the road, that the algorithms were apparently not trained for that circumstance. And so the number of edge cases, as they're called, is large, but we need to track them down one at a time. And over time, I have great belief that we will have safe driving cars, and eventually we will get self-driving cars as well. But it's going to take a lot of changes in the designs, and also the design of cars and communications between cars, the design of highways and barriers and instrumentation on highways, and the control centers, which will supervise what happens on the highways in more effective ways. One other addition to this would be the incident reporting sites, such as Sean McGregor's AI incident database, which has more than 1,600 reports of AI failures. That's the kind of data we need to improve performance all around. But I think every industry would be well, or every company would be well to have an incident reporting site, just as the Food and Drug Administration does for pharmaceuticals. The adverse drug event reporting system collects thousands of reports from clinicians, pharmacists, nurses, and patients about what goes wrong with various medications. And we need to do that. It's a sense of humility that no system is perfect, and that we need to learn about the problems so that we can make them. There's a lot to be said about software engineering workflows or verification and validation testing and bias testing. Certainly gotten a great deal of attention appropriately to reduce bias, gender, racial, ethnic, and so on, other kind of biases. And that remains a troubling problem and not an easy solution, but continuous monitoring could help to make that, to reduce the harms, and also open reporting so that we know what's going on. I'll focus on explainable user interfaces. It's a favorite topic of mine, and I hope you'll like my fresh, bold idea for this one. The idea of explainable user interfaces was stimulated by the European GDPR, which required that users be given an explanation if their mortgage was rejected, their parole request, their job application, etc. These are 98% of this work is usually what's called retrospective explanations. And it's a interesting example of how government regulation in Europe produced a huge outpouring of innovation, of tens of thousands of papers about HCAI, explainable AI. And the big discussion is whether they should be local explanations which describe your situation and what you should do versus global explanation that somehow explains the machine learning model, the neural network, and so on. I think there's a better way. And I suggest that instead of trying to fix the confusion that people have or the anger they get, you want to prevent the confusion and surprise that happens. And this is what's happened in the older knowledge-based expert systems as they shifted to rule-based business systems. And they were successful as they moved step by step forward rather than retrospective. Okay. And we want to do the same thing. So I'll call these prospective user interfaces that are interactive, visual, and exploratory. Let me show you. Here's my little mock-up and toy story about a mortgage request. You ask for $375,000. You say a household monthly income of $7,000. Your liquid assets are $48,000. You click submit, and you get an explanation. We're sorry, your mortgage loan was not approved. You might be approved if you reduce your mortgage amount, increase your household monthly income, or increase your liquid assets. Generally considered to be a pretty good retrospective explanation for this toy example. On the other hand, it doesn't really tell you how much you need to reduce your mortgage amount or how much you need to increase the household or your liquid assets. You might, and some of these may be more actionable by your part. You may be able to borrow money from family members to increase your liquid assets. But another approach would be a prospective user interface with these sliders that let you explore. So you could shift the amount requested as you move the slider to the left, you get more blue, your score increases, you get closer to the score needed for approval. If you move the household monthly income to the right, you get more blue, score goes up. If you increase the liquid assets, your score goes up, you get closer to approval. So you can study which one of these are relevant to you and what the sensitivity is, which of these factors really matter most. This idea is gaining traction. I've begun to see more of these. This is a sweet example from some British librarians who gave me permission to use this. Really give it a try. It's called whichbook.net if you want recommendations of novels. You get a set of sliders you can choose from. You get 4, and you can choose between funny and serious, between beautiful and disgusting, between no sexual content, explicit sexual, and then optimistic versus bleak. And as you shift these sliders, immediately the screen updates, you get new displays of covers of books. So there's no question about why you got this recommendation. It's pretty obvious. You move the button, you move the slider, you got a new recommendation. And Newspapers are doing similar things for recommendations, politics, sports, or entertainment. Move the sliders and your recommender window updates with different articles. Here's one for music. It's 5 of Spotify's 14 parameters: acousticness, instrumentalness, danceability, valence, and energy. And as you move them, the recommendation list changes for you dynamically immediately. And so that's the kind of notion I think we're going, giving more user control so they understand what's happening. I should say there's a resistance to this idea from AI implementers who really want to have an automated recommender and are not eager to support human control. But human controls, when they're done right, like automobile controls, we fully expect to adjust the mirrors and our chair and the temperature in the car and the sound and so many other things, even the position of the steering wheel. I mean, manufacturers have gone to great lengths to enable human control of the things that matter to them. And if the controls are done well, then people will use them, okay? So that's the strategy, okay? The other aspects go back to the governance structure. There's 15 items, and I'll just briefly cruise through the notion of safety culture, the growing notion that companies that may have dozens of software engineering teams have to have a culture of safety. It has to be something that's presented as a competitive advantage, that when they take up the safety culture, they get better safety because they've measured the performance, they know about it, they can report it, they can describe it. And it turns out if, a company is done poorly or an algorithm is done poorly, but they then fix it, they get more loyal customers, okay? I mean, this goes back to early studies that showed that laptop customers who had a problem with their laptop and got it fixed were more loyal to the brand than those who had no trouble at all, okay? So you want to work with your customers and you want to fix it and you want to show that your systems are safe, reliable, and trustworthy. There's a lot to talk about over here, but I'll let you dive into that another time. And then the next category is industry level. I'm a great fan of independent oversight mechanisms and thinking about how to have somebody else review what you're doing. I mean, this is what happens in financial accounting. The Securities and Exchange Commission requires every publicly listed company to have an internal review and an audit process, as well as an external independent audit. And so that's the model I think you want to follow. You want to make sure companies, Google, Facebook, IBM, Microsoft, are doing the right thing, which they're really moving towards doing, of internal processes with, data sheets for data sets and model cards and many other ideas that are increasingly taking care of internal management, but at the same time, we need an independent oversight. Facebook established an oversight board, but it's not quite an independent oversight board. So the idea of independence is a vital one, like the National Transportation Safety Board, to supervise what happens or to study what happens when things go bad. And insurance companies will possibly become players here, as they have been effectively for the building trades and transportation and for medical. It may be controversial about the role of insurance companies, but I believe they've had a generally beneficial effect. And then we see these other organizations and professional societies, the IEEE, the ACM, becoming involved in these issues as well. And finally, the idea of government policies, interventions, and regulations, suggested by some as limiting innovation, but as I mentioned, they can increase innovation, as they did in the automobile industry, where fuel efficiency and safety regulations led to enormous innovations in the industry. Companies were first resistant to it, but now they became big fans because customers wanted that. It became a competitive advantage. And there are many levels of government, international ones, regional ones. The OECD provides good leadership for 60 countries about shaping AI policy. In the US now, there's an active debate. Some of you may know Mark Rodenberg leading the effort about an AI Bill of Rights. And I think we should all be aware of that policy direction and pressure the OSTP in the US to push forward in developing these AI Bill of Rights and the ways that we can protect citizens. Okay, so this is the framework, and that's the story here. The summary says there's 3 things to learn. The HCAI framework takes us to a 2-dimensional model. Some have suggested we need a 3-dimensional model, okay, or a 4-dimensional model. Yeah, I think there's other possibilities. I've thought about my version, so you may have your ideas. And this is the tough one. To go from the old language, so popular, familiar, and compelling, to a newer language which suggests a more modest role for technology and a stronger role for human control. And we ought to celebrate humans and human expertise, human creativity, human responsibility, self-efficacy, and so on. Okay. And then the last part of the story is the governance structures. As I say, there's 15 issues here, and I've touched on them only briefly. So you'll have to dig deeper, but some of you may have interests or opportunities to influence one of these 15 areas. I summarize this is the framework for thinking about the book for me, that we start with the high-level issues of human values. We want to support human rights and social justice, individual dignity. Those are sort of the high-level goals. We want to support individual goals of self-efficacy, creativity, responsibility, and social connections. I've mentioned those already. And we do this through the underlying design aspirations of reliable, safe, and trustworthy at the levels of team, organization, industry, and government. And I organize it. My 3 offers are these 3 parts. Those are the 3 parts of the book. At every point, we have to remember in this complex environment, this ecosystem, if you will, of technology development, there are probably 25 or 30 stakeholder groups. Researchers get a lot of attention because they are writing and they're out there pushing the frontiers. The developers, much larger numbers of those, get some attention as well, but maybe sometimes less visible until they have a failure. Business leaders are yet another community, policymakers, and then the vast number of different kinds of users, including users with disabilities, users with exceptional skills, and so on. The other sort of framing notion that permeates my thinking and writing is at every stage we have to worry about what malicious actors might be doing, the cyber criminals, the cyber terrorists, the political operatives who spread misinformation and disinformation, terrorists, etc. We have to worry about bias at many levels. This is a talk on its own, a whole area of how we can reduce bias, or let's say increase fairness in the services we provide by way of technology. And then the humility of remembering flawed software. We all know, if you've ever followed Peter Newman's Risks Forum, you know that there are constant problems in the use of technology. We have to remember that failures are a part of human nature and a part of technology and history, and therefore we have to count that into our the book is out there just earlier this year. I'm pleased it's gotten a warm reception, a set of nice reviews, and continues to get nice reviews. It just got a very long 6-page one that will be published in something called Management Business Review. But it, sort of tells the story, and I'm pleased that people, they seem to be eager to repeat my story. And, they want it to get out there, and it's a fresh story. So Brian Clegg writes, it is one of the most important AI books. I really like that in the last few years. He didn't say this was a human-computer interaction book, which is what I'm known for. He said it's an AI book, and that's where I wanted to go. In the widely read Forbes magazine, David Teich wrote, it's an excellent introduction, valuable to management who need to both understand how to better direct AI development and to require appropriate AI to solve market and social challenges, and those other kind of things. So that's the book, and I'll just close by saying there's lots needed to be done. We need a village. We need a lot of people. Join the Google group, which I weekly post on Wednesdays, a a few pages of commentaries and feedback and notices I get from others. There's more than 2,500 people on this list. So if you go there, you can sign on. If you sign on with a Gmail address, you then can read the previous ones. Google has some restrictions on that, but you can get on there or send me an email and I'll put you on the list. We have a Twitter account, Human Centered AI. Website has additional information, links to research groups and events and so on. And if you want to get a copy, the book is very reasonably priced at about $25 on Amazon, less than that on Amazon. But if you go to the Oxford University Press publisher's site, this discount code will get you a 30% discount. You'll have to pay shipping, but it's a very reasonably priced for a hardcover, full-color book. So I'm pleased they've supported this very well, and they tell me that it's the best-selling of their science books. So that's the story. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you.
I'm glad to take up discussion.
We have a lot of questions, right, that are pending, so we're going to get right to it. I want to just ask, can we get a copy of these charts to share with the people who've been?
Absolutely. I'll send you the slides.
Fantastic. That's great.
Maylin. Share.
Yeah. Maylin, you had some comments, and then we're going to get to others.
Great. Ben, you are a leading light in this field, and we're really, really pleased to have you in talking to our PCI community. And we'd like to feature this on our website in a way that really highlights the importance of the topic you're addressing, as well as your future-facing ideas. One future-facing idea that I want to bring up is sustainability by design. And I'm hoping that in the 7th edition, you can begin to look in that. I don't know if that's in your future. And then the other question I had actually was for you to say a few words about Douglas Engelbart and his notion of human augmentation systems and how that fits into your matrix.
Sure, thank you. Sustainability is clearly part of it. I should have mentioned it more. The guiding force in the book at the very beginning, if I open it up, is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Those 17 goals, there they are. It's right there. It's figure 1.1. That is the guiding force. So those 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the 169 metrics behind them provide an inspiration and an increasing framework for thinking about new technology. And yes, some have criticized and say, when you say human-centered, you're forgetting the environment, you're forgetting climate change. And I say, absolutely not. I mean, when I think of human-centered, I think of building the world and preserving our biodiversity and promoting and improving the environment. So yes, those are definite concerns. Doug Engelbart was an inspirational figure. I had the pleasure to meet him on several occasions, and I was part of the group that gave him an award in 1998 at the ACM HCAI, where he was in tears because his ideas were not accepted. He himself had sort of a chip on his shoulder about that the AI people had limited his impact and even his funding. Not clear that that's true, but that's the way he felt about it. And so when he gets this recognition from HCAI at the conference, he's in tears. And he's a gentle man. He was a gentle man with a great vision. And yes, his augmentation research and center and ideas were influence on me. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to be critical, but his vision was more of the expert knowledge worker who took 6 months to learn to use a system. I believe that we've done a lot better than that by making highly usable systems which people can learn, and by standardizing the design of those interfaces so that the learning they've acquired from one application actually brings over to the other application. And the standardization of those interfaces has contributed to that. So yes, Doug was an inspiration. His ideas remain vibrant. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's great. And as a contributor to human-computer interaction journals and AHFE, Applied Human Factors and Ergonomics. I'm delighted that you just recently received recognition from the HCAI community, all right, in your award. Well done, all right, for a lifetime of work. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was pleased to receive that medal, a very nice medal. Where is it? Here we go.
It's the Olympics for, human-computer interaction.
There we go. I got a medal.
Yeah, great. They didn't
nice
give you the
design.
chain to wear it around your neck, right? There
Yeah.
you go.
I think I'm past that. Maybe earrings, right?
All right, very good. So next up is Doug Hulin. Doug, your question.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate what you have to share. I really liked your concept of these super tools. I thought that was really good. David Rose out of the MIT Media Lab talks about super sight using autonomous vehicle, or excuse me, virtual reality, but this super tools concept I think is really good. I like your aspect about talking about vehicles, automated vehicles. I personally like automated vehicles rather than autonomous, because autonomous has rules of their own, right? And how do we automate things that we have good rules of safety? So one question I have is, you brought the example of vehicles, and right, we're trying to automate vehicles, put more automation into them. Unfortunately, the amount of traffic deaths are going up and up. So, it seems like, okay, we're putting more automation in, but we're actually making a more dangerous road system. Any thoughts on, as we're going through this transition of automation in our systems, do we have more danger than less?
Yeah, I see your comment in the chat. I mean, I thought the data I saw recently showed, progressive reduction in accident rates per whatever 100 million passenger miles until the last couple of years. And there was a suggestion, I mean, it's not understood as to why, only in the years you put seem a little early for that.
Yeah, I just had that statistic to get quickly. But yeah, in the 2000 to 2022, the numbers have gone dramatically, and even
not
on
dramatically, modestly, they've swung up rather than continuing down. There's a couple of suggestions that somehow COVID led to some of that changes. Unclear. The more plausible one seems to be that people are distracted by their cell phones. And so the rise of cell phone usage and the use inside the cars may contribute to it. We earlier this year bought an electric car, and it's really energetic and wanting to grab my phone and weave everything together. And my wife and I have decided, no, we're not going to do that. So we cut all those linkages. And so we don't want to add distractions, even talking on the phone. I know many people talk while driving, and most of the time that's okay. But some people, like Don Norman, some of you will know, have made a point that they are aware that when they come up to an intersection or an on-ramp or off-ramp on a highway where there are greater risks, they don't use those facilities, and they stop talking amongst, he with his wife. So I think there are ways we need to change and understand that the distractions in driving can be massive. And the car we have has more than 200 controls embedded in it, and I just I just don't want all that, and so I limit it. I should say, the data, if you follow it from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, it's an independent organization, but supported by insurance industry. But they do very good research, and got the name of the woman, Jessica Ciccone, sent me their data, which shows actually these advanced driver assistance systems, such as lane following and collision avoidance, are really good. Collision avoidance prevents more accidents, where it stops you from running into the car in front of you. But the lane following prevents more deaths, because lane exits are dangerous, whereas the forward collisions generally are not deadly, or airbags and other things will prevent them from being deadly. So the nuanced understanding of which technologies help under which conditions will drive us forward. And so I think we want to support that kind of research and those kind of evolution. As I said, in passing, I'm a great believer in safe driving cars. Let's get that first, and then let's worry about self-driving. I think that's going to take longer because I'm going to have a higher expectation. Do you want to respond to that, Doug?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I really like this concept of safe driving first and then self-driving. The other statistic is the amount of drugs being introduced, like, so speed, drugs, distraction, those are the killers of safe driving, and automation right now can't overcome human irresponsibility, unfortunately.
That's right. So, well, that is, it's a proposal that's long been around, of having breath analyzers before you can start your engine. It would detect if your breath has a high level of alcohol and would prevent it. And that's met a lot of resistance because it's felt it takes away too much control. And sometimes you have to take someone to a hospital, and you may have had a few drinks at a party, but it's probably okay for you to do that, or the greater danger is not getting to the hospital. So these are a lot of edge cases to deal with. And so, those are the areas I think we can have improvements.
Yeah,
So we're coming up to the bottom of the hour, all right? So we'll continue this thread in a moment. I just want to remind everyone that this is our allocated time. We go into overtime now for a half an hour to, the top of the hour, an additional half hour for your questions. But for anyone who needs to drop off at this point, we thank you for joining us and hearing from Ben. All right, we
please send me
appreciate it.
email or carry the discussion further, and please join the group. The Google group will get you to see some of the things that are happening and the way people are thinking about it. But you're welcome to opt out at any time. But I'm very encouraged by the warm response. And every day or every week I find somebody else has written something. Here's one I saw yesterday. Just it made really made a nice impression. There's a paper in the journal called AI and Ethics, called "The Uselessness of AI Ethics." The uselessness of AI ethics. Guy named Luke Munn in New Zealand wrote this, but it's so powerfully written and so wonderful. And he talks about the meaninglessness of the AI ethics, the isolatedness, and the toothlessness. Okay, he's got these principles, and then he offers some alternatives. So I think it's a great paper, and I'll be writing about it in Wednesday's newsletter, so you can take it there. Anyway, thank you. There's a lot to be done. Need your help.
Yeah, so please stay with us so that we can continue the conversation. But if you need to drop, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Next person up that had questions is Pat Scannell. Pat.
Yeah, hey, I'll let my question stand for itself. Ben, you and I had the pleasure of speaking day one of the pandemic at ASU. You were remote and I was there in person. And I just got my first case of COVID a couple of weeks ago, so my brain's still a little bit brain logged.
Sorry to hear.
No worries, but working on big questions and big issues, people sometimes get confused by the big, hairy audaciousness of it, and they want it distilled down to a tweet. So my question to you was, what investments would you encourage us to focus on today for near, mid, and long-term horizon benefits in the areas that you focus on? I know that that's kind of an unfair set of questions, but I'm trying to in my own mind, distill out the granularity of the tactics that you might recommend based upon the scope of what you're tackling.
Yeah, that's a very important question, and I do think about it, but I have to push back and ask you to clarify. What do you mean by you say, what do we have to do? Who's the we?
Well, fair enough. You talked before about a colleague of yours who who are working on elite decision making. And I just got back from presenting with Katina Michaels again in Silicon Valley, where I was talking to technologists and venture capitalists. Unfortunately, the world of AI tends to be dominated by an audience of elites. I really wish we could turn that around. The problem is, and this is what I spoke about, technology is so sophisticated and so hyper specialized that it's essentially magic to the rest of us. So I would love to say it is to the masses, because I want to empower the masses to be able to begin to have agency in the technology around us. But unfortunately, I think that your audience has to be the elites, the people who make technologies and study technology. How do you view it?
Well, remember my slide that showed that there are many, many audiences and stakeholders. And I could say, yes, it's up to the technologists and the elite, but there's also lots of other ways to influence it. So it's not going to be one thing that fixes this. As I mentioned, one current effort is guidelines for journalists and editors for writing about AI, a very fundamental thing, changing the words in the headlines, changing the way the stories about technology get written. So we have someone from AP, from Mozilla. We've had 3 workshops online in the last month, and trying to craft a set of guidelines which then could actually be implemented. There's another group that's called Better Images for AI, .org, I think. Better Images of AI or for AI, but changing the imagery, getting rid of those robot hands and robot heads, and talking about people. That's why the cover of the book, shows people. It's not got robots, and it shows people working together, on a platform of technology. So that's, just the cover of the book was a whole exercise. And there's a blog post I wrote for the Oxford University Press blog about just the design of the cover and why those things matter. So those are small linguistic things. There's also government policymakers and business leaders, and each one of them will take a concerted effort. I do restate the notion of saying more than this should be should or must. We need to turn this into a competitive advantage so that companies find this to be valuable. We need to turn it into a public policy issue, just as maybe smoking or seatbelts or other issues have been in the past. So this is a long-term effort. My hope is that we'll get these changes done in 15 years, not 50 years. I think the world of the future will be brighter. I want to see it happen sooner. There's just many ways to create these influences. And by my speaking, by your speaking, the op-eds you write, and basically, I think that individual action is where all change begins. And so the question is what each one of us can do in the positions we're at and the people we talk to bring about this change that celebrates human capabilities and ensures that technology is in control. Here's one other story. I'll be at Stanford University on November 15th for a day, speaking at a day-long event called AI in the Loop, humans in charge, okay? And that's sort of a play on my bumper sticker, humans in the group, computers in the loop. So I sort of think there's just sort of ways of reframing the discussion. And for anyone on this call here, send me your mailing address and I'll mail you one of these guys for your bumper sticker or your laptop. It sits on my laptop. So that's kind of where we go. Changing our own behavior is where change happens. I'll take a few more questions, but I'm going to have to get off soon. So let me know who's up next.
We have 3 more people, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
And it's Kat Vack from the Quality of Life Lab in Switzerland. Kat, glad to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I have a bottom-up question. So in our lab, we're trying to model different data sources. and then understand how can model short-term, long-term behaviors and then result in quality of life, taking into consideration also environmental aspects. And what would you suggest? I'm always battle about this role of context and human factors, and I'm implying a lot of qualitative methods along all this deep learning, machine learning, and making sense of the data. But before, I do a lot of like explorative research. I do also observational studies and involve the individuals. In some cases, clinical studies with patients. But I'm looking for more tips, because sometimes I'm also kind of when do I stop and when do I embed these different variables in these models, and then also how often do I shall come back to the users and update the models.
Bravo, thank you. I mean, I think that's the right idea, and I hope you can convince others in the AI community to increasingly use that kind of method of qualitative, but also engaging with users at every stage, at the beginning, at the middle, and in the continuous use of these systems. You never stop connecting with users. You never stop observing users and collecting data. That's what, business marketing is all about. You're always observing, and because users are changing, the needs are changing, and those who succeed will be those who are most clearly in touch with what user needs are. And so you're on the right track. And again, it's a humbling prospect, because it's more than one person, and it's more than a lifetime. It's a way of thinking and a way of working. But I'm hopeful that people like you can spread that belief and tell your stories about how that worked out.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm always, if you have a good story to tell me about how your approach paid off, I can tell others about that. So do let me know, or it'll wind up in the next newsletter if you have a good story.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you.
And Ben, to the changing customer, I delivered a keynote once that was called "Products are solids and customers are liquids." And so you got to freeze the specs every once in a while but the customers are always changing. Mark Prinsky, glad to have you with us.
Hey, hi Ben. Thank you for your talk. I looked up your age. It turns out you're a young'un. I'm a year older than you. But I see this very differently, and that's what I'm known for, is seeing things very differently. I see essentially a religious argument here. I think it's what Harari calls humanism, and you could replace human-centered with God-centered, Nazi-centered, pharaonic-centered. It could be any centered you want. We happen to be focusing for the moment on humans. But the thing that I want to discuss with you, and maybe larger than this, is that I see it as going not as a competition, but to a symbiosis. And I don't see it any different than evolution suddenly incorporating breathing into being human, suddenly incorporating digestion into being human, without any conscious control of these things. So why isn't this the first steps? Obviously, we're very early in the process of a symbiosis with humans and the technology that we've created that are going to make us a new evolution of humans in the future. And so that's my question. What do you think of that?
Sure. Thank you. I mean, Licklider, or Lick as he was known, wrote this famous paper in 1960 about man-computer symbiosis. And if you read that paper carefully, he makes a clear distinction about what the role of people are and what machines. I don't think that we're going to be, assimilating technology. Sure, we'll have eyeglasses, we'll have hearing aids, we may have other implants or other bodily assistance, prosthetic devices of all kinds may come about, but I don't see that as an evolution of human nature. I do think people are different from machines, and we should use all the technology we can to amplify, augment, enhance, and empower ourselves. But I resist the idea of symbiosis, teammate, partner, collaborator even. To me, AI teams is a big word these days. And yeah, I understand the point, but I don't think so. I had a recent query from a Swedish professor who said, do you really oppose the concept of teamwork? with computers? And I thought about it, I said, yes. I don't think it's a good model. I think, it's a leftover model from a much more limited thinking process. So, yeah, I understand the idea of symbiosis. I don't want to fight against you too hard, but I find the other language more productive. You want to respond?
I do, and I respond with an invitation. I live in Palo Alto. When you're out at Stanford, I'll be happy to try to convince you of another point of view, because I see your perspective as very old-fashioned. And so, with smiles on both our faces, I'd love to sit down and think it through with you. So that's
well, us youngsters have fresh ideas sometimes, and so it may be hard for you to take in, Mark. But let's sit down over a beer or dinner.
happy to do that. It's
we could pick up on that. Yeah, I mean, I've heard this before, and I don't want to be too harsh in opposing it. I just haven't found. I found that the other notion that people are special to be more helpful. Yes, people are problematic. They're malicious actors. They make mistakes. Kahneman and Tversky tell us about all the kind of biases and failures that people have. Yet, I mean, I met Kahneman, we've talked about this. I mean, people still are special in my world. So that's my...
Your world is, that's a religious belief, right? You do accept that?
Yeah. So you guys have a date over a beer. Let us know how it turns out. Okay. Thanks.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Fantastic. And Ben, you have the last question, my friend. Jump in from Atlanta.
Hi, Ben. Ben, always great to hear from you and see the evolution of your thought, and as well. Mine is somewhat not dissimilar to Mark's, and that is I resist turning the dial too much. I don't want us to be a bad servo mechanism that negates the rights of the systems that are a part of the collaborative exchange. We tend to look on it as one system player, one human player, but everyone is an ecosystem, and we're turning a dial of rights and authorities on it. And I approve and applaud that we've turned too far on perceiving that the rights are due the system. But I don't want to give license to the other side of that either, to say that a city is an operating system itself, that I don't want a lot of humans continuously involved in decisions in some of in some of the ecosystems. Anyway, it's just an issue of the dial turning. I want to make sure we don't turn it too far the other way. That's all.
You better watch out for that snowfall in Atlanta, Ben. I don't know what's going on there behind you.
Oh yeah, well, it's the fireplaces there, so
Yeah.
I'm all cool.
Well, I think if I remember, our last discussion was over a beer. Was it in Minneapolis?
Possibly Minneapolis.
But anyway, thank you for your point. And I guess, we'll just have to leave this one as a discussion about whether humans are special or whether machines are special, and whether we want to be part.
And the answer is yes.
Okay. That's all right. Let's end with yes.
All right.
Thank
Very
you
good.
all. Thank you for putting this together, and I've enjoyed it. Spirited
And
morning.
thank you so
discussion.
much. And we look forward to getting your charts. Thanks for giving us permission to
Do
share
that.
this recording with others who want to hear what transpired today. And again, thanks for being with us.
And thank
Have a
you,
great
Kat,
Sunday, what's
for
left of it.
smiling, supportive faces there.
You bet.
Okay.
Have
Good.
a good one, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, Ben.
All right.
Thank you very
Stay
much.
safe.
Bye.